Welcome everyone to our
Blah,
third
blah, blah,
episode.
blah. Terry.
Where?
Terry. Where is John Wilson at?
Walter, I think he's not with us.
I am always never with y'all. Where's John Wilson?
Correct.
Why is he not here?
Well, Walter, since you're with us, maybe it's part of the thing that since you're with us, John's not with us. So, Mark, if you wanna introduce us, John C. Wilson, who is not with us. Remember, that's how we start it. That way, everybody thinks he's dead.
Yes, the John C. Wilson,
Wait
who
a
is not with
second.
us.
I am going to be with us.
Okay.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you jokers are talking about.
What?
Not with us.
John,
Where you been?
Not with us.
I was just about to put the little angel wings on you.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have anywhere else to go. I really have nothing else to do.
Well,
So
that's
he doesn't
second
have
best friend
anything
life.
else to do, so we're his second best.
That's
Second
not
best
true.
friend
Hold
life.
on a minute.
Second best friend.
Keith, I'll call you back in a little bit.
Imagine that.
Sorry.
What was the book called, Terry?
How to be a best friend when your name's not Keith.
Yeah, how to be a best friend. Your name's not Keith. I'm glad Keith is still involved in this podcast.
10 copies. Tens of copies have sold.
Do you think we can?
Copies.
Do you think we can get Keith to be a guest appearance of the podcast?
Should be fairly easy.
He
without him.
has respectfully declined an interview.
What is he doing?
It doesn't matter what he's
He's
doing.
busy with his best friend.
He wouldn't accept an invitation from us.
No.
Wouldn't accept an invitation.
Only John.
I remember this time that we decided that a few weeks ago that we were going to do a podcast and we were going to talk about EMS related type stuff. And I don't know that we've done that yet.
We should we start?
Probably.
Oh yeah, there was a whole thing we're supposed to be doing here, right?
Keith is not an EMS, is he?
He's not a paramedic?
I didn't say he wasn't a paramedic.
She didn't say he was either.
Anybody who's a best friend of mine is a paramedic.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Terry, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Not going there. I will leave that one alone.
I feel like there's a whole nother episode we're going to have to record just for this whole conversation.
It probably would not be.
It wouldn't make the cut.
Yeah.
The title though would be "Where's Keith?"
Gentlemen from Duplin County, did you have a topic to discuss?
Yeah, and it's about EMS. So we do have an EMS topic to discuss tonight.
Smash that like button, subscribe, and that way you get those notifications.
We're not going to do
when the new podcast drop.
No, none of this.
Need to do all the.
I don't know where to put my hands at, so that wouldn't work.
So
I don't have my pinky ring on. So,
hand.
Mark, what's our topic before John continues to derail us?
Yes. So what we're actually going to talk about is promotion. So someone that's going through a promotion process. Hopefully they have several good candidates that they're going to go through this interview, assessments, whatever the thing is that we're going to do. But historically, I feel like we've always promoted the best paramedic, not necessarily the best leader or the person that's best suited for the job. So I feel like we've been doing this process wrong the whole time. Every now and then we've hit the nail on the head, right? Every now and then we can a blind squirrel finds a nut, but I feel like we've kind of set ourselves up for failure by doing that. I mean, and it's just inherent. We're just picking the best person that we see at work regularly, routinely, right? We know they're doing all the things correct, but we put them into that position. Here's the keys, here's the radio, here's the responsibility, and all the people you're responsible for now. Do we show them how to do it?
Well,
who shows them how to do it?
And before John C. Wilson starts, a famous chief has a quote, and she says that she is looking for supervisors and not super paramedics. And so I would just start out by saying, Mark, I think you hit the nail right on the head. That for years we've been doing it wrong, and that's part of the shift in the business. John, you keep opening your mouth like you want to say something.
I'm not gonna let John talk either. I'm gonna talk before John does.
Good.
So since he wasn't with us tonight and then decided he was going to appear with us. So, I think we're even, I think we're working on the right track, but used to it was do you hire the best paramedic to be a supervisor, or do we just do an interview process and then hire the individual? I think we're even working on a better track of like assessment centers or other things other than just a 10-question interview panel that the interviewee candidate is going to answer the right questions because they're coming for an interview, but trying to put them out of the box a little bit and putting them into the role of that captain, that lieutenant, that supervisor, that whatever, actually may get a little better feel of what the individual can do and even make their light shine a little bit more, of somebody maybe you didn't think would have done a great job actually does well in those type. John, I'll let you talk now.
Oh, I like that when you say let their light shine. That's pretty good.
Let their light shine. That's right.
Yeah.
Like a light bulb.
I wonder if all along that it isn't that there's not any intent behind doing it wrong. It's who did they learn from? Does anyone even know, what they're looking for? Like, how much does a human resources department get involved and make you change the things maybe that you want to do? Sometimes you can be handcuffed by that, right? And you don't have the ability to maybe do some of the things that, at least from your EMS perspective, this is how things should look. This is how I'd like to do things. And so I just wonder if tradition has been like, hey, let's just have an idea of who we want to promote. And I don't know that it identifies best paramedic. Does it identify person I like the most? And I, you know how I feel about that. That's sort of one of those things where you're building that good old boy network that I think a lot of folks just don't like or feel prejudiced against. And so I wonder if it's just a little bit of that traditional, this is the way we've always done it, that's led to it. And so we just look at, or could it be that you are looking for really good paramedics? Because I do know there's a certain part of that. It's like, hey, you don't want to take your poor performing paramedic person. They can't be a bad paramedic, right? They can't be a bad paramedic, but what are we defining that with? So when you get into the root of what makes somebody bad, are you judging that based off of any particular standard or whatnot? And I mean, I think, Terry, you're probably more in a position than any of us right now of looking at people that go through promotion processes. I mean, I think I've sat on a promotion process with you before. I know Walter has done that. And I know Mark and I have talked about promotion processes he's sat on before, but Terry, I think you see that more. What are you looking for? You're in that game doing that right now. How do you view it?
No, it's a multifocal approach, because you have to be competent as a paramedic, but if you're solely looking for those paramedic skills and that scene management, then you're doing it all wrong. So looking at that candidate in a whole way, both in terms of the agency I'm working with, we've run some processes recently, been able to travel and visit some folks, and even just having discussions with other people, not just across the state, but in some other states and some other regions, saying, hey, what does that promotional process look like? And I think Walter hit it just right on the nail on the head. And I'm so excited about it that I'll get all cattywampus. That I think Walter hit it perfectly, that you have to put that person in that situation and say, okay, you want to be a lieutenant, you're a lieutenant, you're a captain. And now the titles are made up, because in EMS, you can be a captain in one agency and you're running a shift, or in other agencies, you're a captain on a truck. So you're that shift supervisor, assistant shift supervisor, whatever, battalion chief, whatever it is. And these are the problems. And I've seen people do it a couple of different ways, whether that's that interview situation and asking the questions. I know some agencies do some role play where they'll bring in some, for lack of a better term, actors, some folks from some other agencies, who get to role play a situation, or some in basket exercises, or even just in that panel interview, asking, okay, how would you handle these types of situations? And I would say that's one of the things is putting yourself in that situation. And I think you have a quote about that, if you remember it.
Who, me?
Yeah, you, John C. Wilson.
I don't know what my quote is. If quote me then.
It's Christmas morning. It's Christmas morning, and you can't say, hey, we're the presents. Santa Claus didn't bring any presents. No, you are Santa Claus. You have to play that role. You have to play that part.
Okay, I'll be your Santa Claus. I like it.
He does. He does say that. He does say that.
I'm glad I said it.
You know, but you know, we don't know what we don't know.
Billy
And,
Langston.
You know, Billy Langston. So, you know, we don't know what we don't know. So, you know, we're learning a lot, and, you know, EMS is still young. Look at some of the other, you know, you think about law enforcement and fire, they already have developed these promotional processes and promotional guidelines on how to do that. EMS really has not. So we didn't know any different. So we were doing what we thought probably was right and trying to do the right thing. We're just learning from other. And Terry, I think you did a good thing. You know, I say this all the time: the grass is not always greener on the other side. And
Amen.
sometimes you just need to go out and be able to say, you know, hey, how do y'all do something, or how is it done here? And, you know, I've had some people before go, you know, I went through a promotional process just so I could see how it was, not because I wanted to leave, but I wanted to go through a promotional process to see how it was. And I think, you know, that's the things that help leaders to be able to develop their organization and their leadership in their organization, supervisors, lieutenants, captains, whatever you want to call those, front line, first line, second line supervisors, is, you know, is being able to figure that out and what works for your agency, because what works for Duplin may not work for Dare, may not work for Wake, may not work for Buncombe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you got to work on what's for your agency and figure out how your agency does that to be able to improve that.
And
process.
what I would say is people sometimes get offended when they say, well, this is what the fire service is doing, or this is what law enforcement is doing. But one of the quotes that I like to use, why reinvent the wheel? I'm gonna steal the wheels off of your car. And talking with folks and talking with a sheriff's department. And it's about that relationship. I think that's a trend. That's a statement that we have stressed as we've traveled throughout the state in our conversations, in the conferences and everything that we do. I think those relationships extend into your human resources department. And that's one of the big things. If you were to ask me a couple of pieces of advice, is one of them is working with your human resources department to say, hey, making sure that your questions are within bounds, because you might be well-intended with something, but it is very easy to run afoul of some sort of violation with something that you're asking or an activity that you're doing. And so you're not always going to know those things. And I would liken it to calling medical control for a paramedic. Call human resources and get human resources to give you a hand with that.
I wonder, you know, also you think about people that are getting promoted, how much is it the drive of the person, like in the passion of the person? So just for instance, someone that wants to apply for something because they're just tired of the way things are, versus that person that really wants to do good and wants to go out there and be promoted. And like, I have things that I want to do. Are assessment centers, are these evaluation processes designed so that the people that actually have the passion and vision able to illustrate that? Mark, it is, what do you do?
Well, I think this even goes back even before that. Like, as a paramedic on the truck, did I truly understand what it took to be a assistant shift supervisor or a shift supervisor or a training officer, operations officer, director? Did I know enough to make that decision, you know, wisely? You know, do I just want to, you know, go be a QRV paramedic because being a supervisor puts me on a QRV instead of being on an ambulance? Well, yeah, you get to be a paramedic on a QRV, but there's all these other things that come along with it too. right? And I think that's probably one thing we don't really do a really good job of, is sharing that information of what it takes to be a shift supervisor, what it takes to be assistant supervisor, and so on and so forth. Is sharing that information with our colleagues, with our shift, with our agency, so that they know whenever they make that decision to put in for that position, for that supervisor, or whatever, in the rank and file, they're making that decision with the best of intent, making an educated decision at that point. Right?
So there's an agency, Mark, let me interrupt you real quick, that did that, and they called it TLC, Tomorrow's Leaders Class. And so they brought in these folks and they said, okay, we're going to run this process. And if you're interested in participating in this process, we're going to have a series of classes that we're going to do in person, and we're going to have some discussions for some stuff. And that was one of the common ingredients at the end of that series is the feedback that they got from their folks was, I had no idea that this is what this level of supervisor did. And it was pretty eye-opening. And it's kind of like that behind the scenes tour of whatever theme park it is that you're in love with, and seeing how the rides, how everything works. And I think you're doing a disservice if you're not having that conversation, because it's no different than us in our patient care. If I assume when I show up in a chest pain patient and they have a cardiac history, if I just assume that they've taken nitro, if I assume that they've taken aspirin, well, we know what happens with that. Same deal. You can't just assume that these folks know. Sit down and have that conversation.
So, I Terry, you were talking about HR a while ago. Sometimes HR sometimes forgets about the public safety agencies do things a little different than a normal office position does. So, I've sat on a few interview panels with an HR person that they were completely blown away by, some of the things that EMS did, and what are they doing? Because I don't understand, what is this that they do? Oh, they do that every day. So, I think that you're also helping educate your HR department about what you do with those processes as well when you involve them in your promotion. There was another agency that did a course similar to that, and theirs was a internal leadership series course, very similar to what you had. And they actually required anybody who was coming into one of those positions to take that course before they could even apply for it. So they have not done that course. That director has left, or chief has left and gone, but they actually required them to do that before they could even apply for that position, just so they would have another insight of what it was before they actually did the promotional process.
Do you think people are held back? This is what I was getting ready to ask. Because they are good paramedics, do you think that it's looked at, hey, I don't want to lose a good paramedic and a value that I have in them on the street? Do you think that comes into the mindset of maybe administration or a managerial team that are looking at it, like, I don't want to lose the quality paramedic? When we're looking at it from, are we promoting good paramedics, or based on that, do we sometimes maybe say we're not going to promote them because they are a good paramedic and we don't want to lose the street value,
So I would even add, on top of that, knowing that a lot of our workforce, and I can speak, from some experience with this, a lot of our workforce is younger. And whenever we look at promoting into these entry-level positions, into a, whether it's an FTO or assistant supervisor, or even a supervisor position, and this paramedic has been a paramedic for, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, right? Whenever there used to be a requirement where you had to be a paramedic for X number of years before you can even be eligible for that promotion. I think that's, something else to kind of build on top of that, John, is, the younger group that we have coming into the profession now. Had they served that time to have gained that experience as a paramedic, working scenes, doing all the things, to set themselves up for success, versus, promoting them kind of early. Like, yeah, you've been a paramedic for like 2 or 3 years, but you haven't experienced this. You probably haven't done that. And we see that, from a clinical perspective of, you just don't have that experience in that paramedic yet, but they're being put into these positions.
But with the
Right.
experience levels changing, like we're not getting the things that like Walter and myself, Terry, even you, Mark, we've all seen. Healthcare's gotten better. The calls have changed. The high acuity level of what we're seeing out there isn't the same. So my 2 years becoming a paramedic, my first 2 years are way different than what's coming out now. It's 2 years. You had to have 5 years of experience to be promoted, just to say as a shelf, you have to have 5 years. But that, 1990s, 2005 years looks different than 2023's 5-year person does. And so is that even taken into consideration? Terry, do you look at that? Do you say, hey, the person's experience does depend on where they're getting it from. It does take a little bit longer to gain what is equivalent to years of experience now. Even so, it's like we really need you to have 7 years of experience to equal the 2 years we want, and we're lowering the threshold to say you only need 2 years of experience. I mean,
No, we're not lowering the bar. And here's the statement that I make is to some of our folks is maybe when you got hired or promoted, this is where the bar is. This is where the bar is now. Oh, wait, you can't say that because that's off camera, because that's where the bar is going. The bar is going that high. And one of the things that I would say is you have to find different ways to how do you recreate those experiences. And I think it's difficult to do that, but a couple of different things you have to. We looked 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. We would talk about your alphabet classes, and you had your PALS and your PHTLS or BTLS and your ACLS. And I think now you have to look at other classes. Have you had your people class? Have you had an all hazards class? This was part of where the EMS officer series came from, and where we were doing that QRV response series, because hey, we had to come up with something. And I would also say that one of the things that in my agency that I routinely do with our folks is, hey, you had an experience, cool. How can we take that experience and show it to everybody? And so we will do, for lack of a better term, grand rounds when there's a good call, those terrible calls that make the news. We take it, we pull the audio, we'll talk about charts, we'll get statements from employees about what they saw or what they learned. But that's what I would say is we're not lowering the bar with that stuff. For me, I have to think outside the box to push that information to folks. Walter, what are your thoughts with that, your viewpoint with that? I mean, because from that college standpoint, you're somebody who I'm going to a lot of times to say, hey, can we bring this person in, or what about this class?
Well, I think you hit it, because used to it was, did you have your ACLs? Did you have your PALS? Well, we really had to think outside the box, but we didn't have these classes before. So as John said, in the, say, 2000s, some of these classes didn't exist. So that's the classes that you look at. You have to look at the, what else has this individual done under their professional growth of leadership, or of wanting to advance to a leader. To answer John's questions earlier, do I think that people maybe look over the good paramedic because they don't want to take them off the truck? I think that's the ones that you really want to try to bring in, because they're trying to better themselves. They're doing better. And if you don't do something for them, they're going to leave your organization, because they're going to go to an organization that values them and wants them to move up. So, I go ahead.
That's that person too, when you put them in that role. That now they have the ability to shape that future and to work with the other paramedics and to say, hey, looks like you're struggling with this. I struggled with this too. And they are going to want to surround themselves with great folks, and they're going to build them up.
And, I think that day of had to be a paramedic for 5 years before you can apply for a supervisor, I think it's gone out the window, because the average paramedic is not even a paramedic for 5 years. So I don't think that you can say, okay, we got to have 5 years of experience. You may have somebody that comes in that has transferred from the sheriff's office or the police department or for the fire department that had leadership experience, and they're doing great. So, you may, with Mark said, change that a little bit and figure out what they have and how they can help your organization.
So in that case, then you're not even considering whether or not you're promoting good or bad paramedic. You're just taking it's whatever. I'm saying, when you look at this, you got a bucket, and it used to be, hey, I got a bucket of people. I'd like to have a bucket of, I don't know, 5 good people, and I can make them a lieutenant, and I get to pick one of those. But now it's kind of like, I've got a person that can be lieutenant, and do I base it off of, are you going to promote someone when you know they're going to med school? I mean, and they're telling you that, hey, I'm going to go to med school, and I'm really good at the job I'm doing now. I'm a good paramedic. I'm a great paramedic, and I'm going to go to med school. Do you think that makes you say, do I want to go through? Is that what I want out of my leader? Does that make a difference? And I think
do I want my leader to be bettering themselves? I think that answers it. If they're saying they're going to med school in 3 months, I'm not going to get a return on that investment. But if that person, a couple of things that I've there's no certainties in life, and so just because they say they're going to med school, we've had folks that have walked in the door that said, I'm doing this job to get to another position. And sometimes they do. There's a fellow who I work with who talks about, he went to EMT school because he wanted to go be a park ranger in a zoo, and he had to have his EMT for that. And then he fell in love with it and said, I'm just working in a different zoo. And so went and got their paramedic. So what I would say to that is, why would I not want them? Why would I not want somebody who's going to be bettering themselves? Why would I not want somebody who's going to be doing something? So, Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of different things you got to consider. Like certainly the person that isn't going to be there in the next 3 to 6 months. Going through the promotion process for whatever level position it is. Yeah, I think it comes with its own challenges, but you got to look at the amount of motivation and all the things that the person's had to go through just to get to the point where they can go to med school, right? The amount of discipline one has to have to be able to work through something like that. And if we can give them that opportunity, like I said, put them into that, they're into that position, they might like it, and they might decide, well, hey, I see a career in this role moving forward. So, yeah, I think we've had a lot of real good discussion tonight. I think we're probably going to have to roll this over into another episode because I feel like we still have several talking points that we want to get through on this tonight. But I think we'll have to finish it out right here with some closing thoughts. Terry, what have you got?
Man, my closing thoughts. One of the things that I would say is if you're going in for promotion, you have to prepare yourself and talk with folks that are doing the job. Hey, what are the lessons that they have learned along the way? You shouldn't be doing that when that promotional process pops open, whether that's in your agency or somebody else's agency. Maybe I want to be a training officer. And so I'm going to talk with my friends that are training officers across the state to say, hey, what are some lessons that you've learned? What did you do to prepare yourself? And then I'm going to prepare myself to be in that position. One of the best candidates that I saw was interviewing for a position, and they had spent the last 18 or 24 months preparing for that position, and they didn't make a ton of fanfare about it in those previous 18, 24 months. And they sat down for that interview. They were able to answer the questions. They were able to talk through stuff, and they laid some paperwork down saying, these are the classes that I've taken the last couple of months, the last year or so to get ready for this. And so if you're looking for promotion, I think you have to be a good paramedic, but I think you have to prepare. You have to do your homework for it. John C. Wilson, who's with us, what are your thoughts?
First thought I've got is the person that said that he's working in a zoo with you realized that the sharks must be present at the Outer Banks because, I mean, what else would you have in a zoo out there anyway, right? Maybe some.
Terry, you knew he was going to bring it up at some point.
Fake news.
I think each agency specifically has to look at their workforce coming in, and we're all fed by different things. The community college system is feeding the majority of the EMS systems. EMS systems are starting to feed themselves now. And I'm curious to see what that's going to look like in the future, because we know we've talked about that gap that exists between initial or entry level provider to hireable or employable person, and how that's going to be addressed. I think that's going to feed into promotion processes. So how a person prepares does depend on their passion to want to do something. And that's what makes it agency specific. Like, do you want to make that agency better, or are you selfish trying to make yourself better? Walt?
The word Walt, just so you know.
Walt.
Do what?
Wally.
So, I think Terry hit a good thing there. Get prepared now. Don't wait until the day that the job posting comes out. Get prepared now. Start preparing for your future. If it's something that you want to do to move up, start working on it today. Don't wait until the day the posting goes out and then try to work yourself up in the 2 weeks that the posting is out there for. John, you got another good thing is, how is this going to work in the future, trying to fill the gaps that we have? We know we all have gaps everywhere. But be prepared, know what's out there, know what's going on, look and see what's out there. Maybe try, and don't get your feelings hurt if you don't make the first promotional process. Learn from it, figure it out, and then come back and do another promotional process. I've had a few of those that have come through multiple promotional processes and finally did get one of those positions and just were beat out every time. Mark, finishes out.
Yeah, I can remember years ago, previous training officer told me one time that you should always be working to make yourself as marketable as possible. Taking any of the classes, doing whatever it takes to improve yourself, because whenever that day comes for that promotion, if you're not prepared, well, it's too late now, right? So I think that's really the biggest thing, is you should always be working to make yourself as marketable as possible.
And sharks cannot survive rip currents, I don't think. I think if a shark gets caught into a rip current, I don't know that a shark can actually. Does a shark change the way they think while they're caught up in the rip current? I mean, or are they trying to get the person? That's probably another time.
This is why he doesn't. This is why he doesn't. This is why he doesn't go to the beach, Terry. This is why he doesn't go to the beach or live close to the beach. They don't have this over there.
Walter had a point with his statement. There was a quote that I saw that I'd screenshotted because I thought, man, this would be great on the podcast. Is sometimes the bad things that happen in our lives put us directly on the path to the best things that will ever happen to us. And so sometimes hearing no, that doesn't necessarily mean no, not at all. Maybe it's no, not right now. Maybe it's no, you're pretty good, but somebody was a little bit better. Not to be confused when John C. Wilson doesn't get bit by a shark. It doesn't mean that there's better people out there. It just means that the shark was somewhere else.
Like in a rip current, but I'm assuming you must have sent that screenshot to your real best friend, because I didn't get it.